I have something to show you, and it's really bizarre. I just finished watching the Lifetime docu-series, which is 4 episodes about the Judd family, and it's entitled The Judd Family, Truth Be Told. If you didn't grow up in the 80s or the 90s, you probably won't know who Wynonna and her mother, Naomi Judd, are. But they were a dynamic duo who sung, and Wynonna often played guitar. Mostly country and blues. However, in recent years, Wynonna has been making a little bit of a change to her music style and incorporating a lot more rock into even older songs. And a lot of people know that Naomi Judd also has a younger daughter named Ashley Judd, who is a very, very famous A-list actress, and she has spent over 3 decades of her life doing humanitarian work, where she is a United Nations ambassador. Although she still acts today, it's very few and far between that she takes roles, but she's known for very big hits, including Double Jeopardy and Kiss the Girls. Now, there have been a lot of documentaries and books, even written by Ashley and Naomi herself, about their upbringing, about their life, about their career, and about their family dynamics. Now, I really liked the documentary, but I have a couple key points that I was very disappointed about. And if you don't know about the early life of Naomi Judd, you probably don't know that she was a teen mom, which ultimately led to her being kicked out of her parents' house. She ends up marrying somebody other than Wynonna's biological father, who she was deeply in love with when she became pregnant with her. But she convinced this other man that Wynonna was biologically his until the truth came out. And later, it did come out. It was actually the paparazzi who broke the story and tracked down her biological father, putting his picture in the tabloids. Could you imagine finding out that way? But the inner turmoil between Wynonna and her mother Naomi has always been obvious to those who paid attention. Naomi was raised in a time where women were homemakers, and they were expected to do all the cooking, the cleaning, to present themselves as perfect and beautiful, always with a face of makeup. You notice people like Dolly Parton do the same thing. She's been quoted saying that her husband never saw her without makeup or something nice on. Naomi's marriage ends up not lasting but a couple years, and it was very obvious to Wynonna growing up that that was not her biological father. However, she has Ashley with that same husband. And the husband also said that even though he was being told that Wynonna, when she was pregnant with her first as a teenager, that she was biologically his, he could tell when she was a toddler just by looking at her that that was not his child. She ends up living in California for quite a few years, where she ends up getting into another relationship with somebody who was very aggressive and was not a good person at all, caused an immense amount of trauma in the family. She moves back home to Kentucky. That was in 1976. Now, she went to school to become a nurse, and she was working very hard as a single mom, trying to make ends meet. She later on meets Larry Strickland, who is her husband of over 3 decades. However, this is when she starts forcing a very young Wynonna to not only learn to play guitar, but to sing over and over and over, practicing over and over and over. And she starts harmonizing to Wynonna's voice. Not only curating this entire career path, but actually forcing it. Forcing a false image and reputation that just doesn't truly exist. Now, they had a lot of hits, like Grandpa, Love Can Build a Bridge, Turn It Loose, Have Mercy, Crazy. They also have a lot of cover songs that they did. Give a Little Love. Wynonna has covered a lot of blues songs as well when she ended up going solo. Now, that was years later, but her mother ends up leaving and retiring from the Judds. And the reason why was because she was diagnosed with hepatitis C. Now, later on, Naomi would be one of the very few people that would actually be cured of hepatitis C. And that's extremely rare in and of itself. However, she always struggled with mental illness and mental health issues. Now, you see Winona and Ashley talking very openly and honestly, really for the first time ever in their entire lives. And they were not doing their mother any favors, but in a way they were. And that's the part that I'm kind of disgruntled about. Because this documentary could have been a perfect opportunity to show people everything honest and transparent and raw behind the scenes. Now, Winona and Naomi had been largely estranged for the last several years of Naomi's life. And it's not that they never saw each other. It's just that their relationship really had soured. And there was a lot of resentment and bitterness. She didn't like Winona's new husband, Cactus, nor did she like the fact that she was taking old songs that she wrote and giving them a new sound, a modern sound that she was still performing. And she very much felt threatened by that because her entire reputation, her entire image was wrapped up in being the one who created the Judds. She loved the fact that people couldn't even tell if she was the mother or the daughter. And that bothered Winona. Being a young woman and a daughter, being carefree, her mother projecting this perfect image and persona, it clashed. They clashed. But Easter is a very hard time for Winona and for Ashley because on April 30th of 2022, at the age of 76, Naomi Judd passed away from a self-inflicted wound. Now, she was always open to a certain degree about her mental illness, including severe depression, anxiety, and bipolar disorder. She had been hospitalized so many times. She oftentimes had episodes of mania where she would stay up for hours and hours and hours just pacing. She had an in-home therapist and psychiatrist who had been helping treat her for years. And she did this the day before her and Winona were being inducted into the Country Hall of Fame, where they were expected to not only take the stage for their award, but to speak, to actually give a speech for their acceptance of that award. Of course, there's resources right down below for anybody, yourself, anybody you may know that needs help for any kind of mental disability, mental illness, or mental health issues in this kind of way. I want to reiterate that first and foremost before I continue. Now, Ashley had spent the last many years of her life basically every day with her mother. Now, her mother and her husband's house, Ashley's house, and Winona's house were all on the same family farm property. She dedicated a lot of her time to really taking care of her mom, for being present, and unfortunately, that did eat up a lot of her time and energy. The thing that really upset me is that Ashley Judd still skirts around, and she's very articulate, she's very intelligent, especially verbally, but she really skirts around what really happened. I mean, she does talk about it, but what really happened, what really was going on, and doesn't have the very direct terminology that I feel was a missed opportunity to actually talk about it, to talk about what she was really going through, what was really happening behind the scenes. And that is so needed today, because if you're going to tell a story, you need to do so 100% honestly and openly, so other people can relate to that story. You can't relate to a story that is false or it is sugar-coated. On her mother's passing anniversary, she does a video on Instagram talking about how her mother always taught her to believe in fairies. Now, this is something she talked about in a book a long time ago. Going into the woods as a child and believing in fairies. She also celebrates her birthday and Easter, which is right before the anniversary of her mother's passing, and she posts an entire series of photographs where I noticed that up in the upper right corner. Dragonfly? No. If you look closer, it is a fairy literally a fairy. I also reviewed the book by Riley Keough and had an orb appear.